our rate tables, and the calls to action that go out with all of our content. We also launched the Home Hacker with Holden Lewis, which is really taking mortgage and shifting it much more to home ownership over a lifetime, HELOC, refi, anything you can do with a mortgage. Game of Loans about personal loans and credit cards. And then 1 to a Million. We've refocused, and we think this is really important, especially as I've spoken to several people here, refocusing financial planning and retirement to really be about a lifetime journey of acquiring wealth. And previously, the terms financial planning and retirement haven't been the sexiest thing in the content area. These two have launched with newsletters. I recommend going and signing up and following them on their social accounts as well. Here's a look at the newsletters, again, incorporating some of our redesign that's happened. And as I get into native in a few minutes here, I'll explain how this is all intersecting with our advertising and the opportunities that come up. And then we're tying all of our content to Life's Financial Journey. I know a lot of places talk about Life's Financial Journey, and Bankrate has been one that over time, we get customers in at different points of the financial journey, but we really haven't brought them over the lifespan of the journey. And we're doing that with a combination of content and technology, as well as our design, to bring people along. So no matter where you come into the journey, we're going to have you there and provide the information and the tools you need throughout that time period. We've already seen improvement on this by doing it by just engaging with people in a much sharper way. I don't know what happened behind me. Is there a street fight back there? Some of my competitors are here, so I don't know what that was. Any questions thus far on this? I've got more to show and talk about. So the other thing we're doing is we're refocusing how we distribute our content and how we publish. Bankrate, when I showed you that first slide, one of the reasons it was so successful was we were really, we've become the dominant player, we optimized with search, and we became this destination for people. And as we know, that's really changed. So our distribution model is the core site on mobile devices, on computers, whatever it may be, but then distributing out on these different platforms. And we've already started doing that over the past 6 months, and I'll show you some of what we've been doing. What we have found is a higher level of engagement, which we think is going to be critical moving forward for all financial services, and how we're talking to people to give them answers. So for example, on Reddit, you guys have probably seen some of these numbers, these aren't Bankrate numbers, this is just overall Reddit numbers. You have this hardcore audience on Reddit that consumes content and asks a lot of questions, and we've been responding to them one-on-one. And that level of engagement has just continued to build over the past year since we started making some of these changes.
How often do you interact on Reddit? Do you post to Reddit? How do you build that kind of a stream?
So we've been scheduling AMAs, and then on top of that, Ask Me Anythings for those who don't know. We've been scheduling a few of those. Reddit limits you. They want to have, is it 2, Carolyn is here, who oversees our social, 2 every couple months or something? Yeah. So you can't spam it. You can't be on there constantly, but you can go in and be responsive to what's going on in there. And we found that effective, as well as the Ask Me Anything. So I recommend it for people. I think anybody in financial services, I've been impressed by their numbers. They're one of the top 10 sites at this point, and the level of engagement is significant. And when you go into subreddits, that's where you get into these topics where people are talking about their mortgage or retirement. We think this is critical for Bankrate moving forward. Hey Dan, how you doing? In how we're engaging with people on social media. And it's not just one platform, it's multiple platforms, as I showed from the network. I'm also really excited about what we've done on Facebook. I know this is the flavor du jour for everybody. And I guess all their video views are overcharged by 2/3 was the news today. So they have their issues too, and all of us have our issues with them, right? But the cool thing about Facebook is we were doing what everybody else was doing, in that we had a following and we built likes, and that's been strong. But this summer, Carolyn and the team launched Money Masters, which has seen a surge in people joining and getting answers directly from Bankrate staff. And so what we found is people who join Money Masters, what we've promised them is responses to their queries. We do provide links to our site at times when we do that. I've been totally blown away at the level of detail people provide. It's been very much detailed about their life's journey on a spouse passing away, what do they do with the money, I'm saving for a house, all kinds of detailed stuff. We think that's key to building our audience on another platform, on Facebook. And then you'll see we did with Greg McBride here, our Facebook Lives. We've launched those this summer, and I know a lot of people are doing Facebook Lives. Our model is pretty simple. We're answering questions from people who write in. I mentioned I'd have some announcements. I'm excited to announce we're hopefully rolling out soon the ability to split screen, so we can have not only two different people from Bankrate, but I want to have direct conversations with consumers out there throughout America. And we think Facebook will be an interesting platform to do that. I also think over time, all of this, the Facebook effort, will not only build our audience, but advertising revenue from advertisers and sponsors who want to advertise against this, because it ends up being a dedicated audience. Any questions on Facebook? Yeah.
Does your audience come back once and again, or just they solve the problem and they move on?
No, they're pretty much a repeat audience. I mean, it's been early going. The question was, Carolyn, is it one and done, or they come back? But I think we've seen a pretty high level of engagement where they're coming back. I think people start with meaty questions, if they have one, and then they end up listening in and are taking advice. We've also found this isn't just Bankrate staff responding, it's part of the community responding. And that's been a real positive thing. We've had to monitor it, but we haven't had any issues thus far. I can think of maybe 2 or 3 people who seemed kind of spammy or were in some questionable business. We get occasional of those. But in general, it's kind of been self-monitoring on its own. So this brings me to native. This was the reason I was supposed to speak today. And with native advertising, so before I joined Bankrate, I was at the Associated Press for 10 years, and I introduced a bit of native there as well. And originally, native advertising, as probably many of you know, was the idea of just the advertisers wanted control of their content around some top brands. So everyone knows about like New York Times Studio and Contently and these other companies doing things for branding. And in the past year, we're seeing that change radically. And I think native is going to be influenced pretty significantly, not only for Bankrate, but for other companies as well, particularly in financial services as you try to reach an audience beyond just display and CPC revenue. So at Bankrate, we've had a couple different methodologies for native. We've had what we call traditional sponsored content. This is editorial content we create independently that an advertiser wants to be associated with. We see that continuing in the near term and really getting positive feedback. They want to be associated with how to save, our financial security index, and our surveys. And they want to be sponsoring that as an exclusive sponsor around it, but they have no control of the content at all. And then we've rolled out a couple things this year that are much more about taking our content and an advertiser's content and putting it together in a way that's effective not only for the advertiser but for the consumer with full disclosures on it. So what you're looking at here is our our VA Loans Hub, which is a niche market within mortgage, but a significant market. And as you can see, I'm not speaking out of school here. You can go to our site and find Veterans United on this hub. But Veterans United wanted to be associated with educating the consumer around VA loans. So we constructed something that is a combination of our content and their content, drives revenue, and keeps church and state lines clean and in line with any consumer issues we have with the government, because we're all in a regulated industry in one way or another, and that was important. And this has been a really good model for us that we see moving forward with other potential advertisers as well. In fact, I'm pleased to announce my other announcement. We're, in the next several weeks, going to be launching a hub with AAG around reverse mortgage. Tom Selleck's up there because he's the new spokesman for AAG. And this should be rolling out, I think we're targeting November for that. Again, in this one, the conversations are really around what do we need to do to deliver for the advertiser as well as the consumer, and be in compliance with everything we do from a regulatory point of view. And then finally for native, we're introducing inline advertising from native. This will roll out. So if you're in the middle of a story, I'm sorry I didn't have a better screen grab. I had all these other colorful things, and this one was tougher to get. But basically you're in a store, you'll see inline advertising. It says presented by GE there, and the consumer can click on it. This is, to us, kind of a form of programmatic native that's going to be coming in, and we're seeing that growing as well. So in terms of the going native, I only have a couple more slides. I wanted to kind of go over what we did and what we see as critical in financial services as people are doing this, which is, and these are in order, the customer needs comes first. What are they seeking? Those were the conversations we had and are having. But then the second thing, it used to be that content, the technology, and the reach was the number two thing or the number one thing. And actually in our business, legal and regulatory is more significant right now because everybody's keeping a close eye on this, making sure everybody stays within the goal lines. And once we identified what we wanted to achieve, we went through the legal and regulatory and made sure we could do this right without getting in any trouble, and also our own standards on what we want to do. And then finally, it was the content, the technology, and the reach, that network. The network I showed you before is going to become more critical, which I'll talk about in a second. And for us, what we're seeing is shift from just branding to really branding and performance. And I don't think that's a surprise to anyone right now, but when I started at Bankrate a year ago, native was really just about brand association. Performance wasn't really measured that way. It was about having your brand associated with a good brand and that content, and that's completely changed in, I'd say, the past year. There's not an advertiser we're talking to that hasn't happened that way, and anyone I've been talking to out here, it's been the same thing. And the reason I mentioned the network in relation to this is what we're also finding is for Bankrate, when we do this successfully, what's going to happen is the network effect will work for our advertisers. So while we want to capture all these consumers, we want to work with all of our advertisers to be able to reach that audience out there, whether we're on Facebook, whether we're on Reddit, and people coming back in, how they consume our content. We're on Medium as well, and several other platforms. We think that model is going to be the one that really changes the game for Bankrate and gives us another 20 years looking ahead and sets a standard the way we did back in 1976, in 96, I think when the site launched, or around there, 95. And it's interesting that we're in these 20-year intervals, and here it is 2016, and we're at it again. Bankrate's always been innovative, and we're going to continue to be so. So that's what I have. It's a tight presentation. Any questions from anybody? We've got a couple minutes left. Yes? Messaging apps? So we're exploring those now. The question was how we're using them. We should be rolling something out in the next couple weeks around Facebook Messenger and maybe Slack. We aren't convinced yet of the traffic implications, or implications is the wrong word. We aren't convinced yet of a significant amount of traffic there. We feel like it's a tool we need. We're going to have it, but I have yet to see what exactly the innovation is going to be that blows it out of the water. Right now, I think it'll be probably what you're seeing a lot when you go onto CNN for like news. You can type in a certain topic, and it kicks you that story back. So for us, it may be around mortgage or refinancing or autos, and you get served the latest stories and tables. But I don't think I'm telling anything that surprises anybody. I think that's the simplistic view. I'd like to figure out is there something more we could be doing there? And I don't know that yet. Any other questions? Tom? Yeah?
Do you feel like that users want journalists, impartial, or they want experts?
The question was, do our users want journalists or experts? I think they want both. I think in the personal finance space, particularly what we do with Bankrate, they're looking for a combination of stories we do. We did a great story the other day about one of the victims of the Wells Fargo debacle, and one of our top traffic stories. And I think people expect that from Bankrate, that we're going to do these stories, and we're going to have more Wells Fargo stories. And at the same time, I think they're looking for expert advice that Sarah or Mark provide, or Greg, on, here are the top 10 ways that you can save $20 right now. I think it's across the board. Here are the things you need for your house. So I don't think it has to be an either-or scenario. I think they're looking for both. The challenge we have at Bankrate, I think, is making sure we're walking the line and not blurring any lines. Your mouth, yeah. I'm coming over because I can't. No.
Traditional
Yeah.
between those hubs. Do you find that the readership is the same, or are they overlapping, or are they different?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
The question was the hubs versus our traditional content. I don't think we have enough data yet to nail that down, but my suspicion is from what I'm seeing traffic-wise, where the path of their journey, it's probably about the same in terms of who's in there. Now, I think over time, we're going to attract more of, say, a veterans audience because we have that, more of the audience around reverse mortgage because we have that. And that's the goal of those. But right now, I think it's people looking for that information. They find it on that hub and they go in.
And they come via
Our SEO continues to be our dominant, which I think is true with you guys and everybody else, right? So as you can tell, as we all are, we're trying to build audiences off those other things. I think it's a much harder play over time. But and I'm also convinced, people think Google's going to, by the way, everyone dealing with the Penguin algorithm, welcome to that. I hope your lives go well. That'll be a lot of fun the next couple weeks, rolled out today. But Google's still going to be there. And I think people, particularly in finance, still do, you end up, if you think about your own lives, you just end up searching that way. What are the best credit cards? What are the best this, that?